Hello all, this is Jeff Mullen. Welcome to another Sclerosis Dialogue as part of the SRS podcast. We have a special one today, which actually previously recorded in October 2020, where Dr. Ananthakrishnan is interviewing Dr. Boachie as part of the Global Outreach Committee.
So I'm really excited to be interviewing Dr. Oheneba Boachie-Adjei for the first SRS GOP Committee podcast. And he's a hero and an inspiration to many people, including me. And for our audience today, Oheneba, I don't think we really need an official introduction. Although I would like to comment that, you're the past president of the SRS, a past AOS Humanitarian Award winner, professor emeritus at HSS, just to name a few. And, they say you can't go back, but after 40 years in the U.S., you did go back and you returned to Ghana to run the hospital that you had built full time. And as I mentioned, to prepare for this interview, I read a lot of articles, watched a few videos, including your CNN African Voices profile, which I encourage all of our listeners to watch if you get a chance. It's really very enlightening. And I learned quite a bit about your life, so I'd really like to dig a little bit deeper into some stuff behind your stories, and then also talk about focus, and then talk about what you see for the future, not only just for focus, but for spine surgery globally. So, let's get started. In terms of your early life, I know that you became very sick at a young age and then were inspired by your pediatrician, who was a Ghanaian pediatrician who I guess trained in the UK. Is that right?
That is correct.
And how did you end up choosing surgery?
Well, it looks like you're jumping generations. First, you start with my life, and then how did I choose surgery? Anyway, but I'm glad to be on this podcast with you, Dheera. It's a pleasure, my pleasure to talk to you about my life, the SRS focus in the future. I think it's important that history be written and also recorded so that the younger generation will know what has come before them. So it is a great opportunity to do this with you this afternoon. And I'm glad to go into the details of what I know and what I am yet to know. We don't know everything. But as you started by saying, that is true. I'm from Ghana, West Africa. Ghana used to be the Gold Coast. It was a British colony. Became independent in 1957. And interestingly, I was in first grade when the country became independent. So there was a lot of turmoil in the country, in terms of the civil unrest and the parties that were fighting each other. But shortly after that, I was basically born into royalty. But unfortunately, I did not enjoy most of it, in my early years because my father lost his seat shortly after I was born. So my mother became the custodian, and she was only a teenager. Oh. So it's really my grandma who was the custodian. But around second grade, I became extremely sick. From a poor family. And my mother at that time had myself and my brother and my other sister. So between first and second grade, I was quite sick, and it was mostly from malnutrition and dysentery and stuff like that. But the family didn't have any money to go to a doctor, so they resorted to the local fetish traditional healers. And I went through a whole bunch of them. Eventually, I wasn't getting any better. So my grandma said, we got to go back into the city. Otherwise, you're not going to make it because all these kids around you are dying. So we went back to the city. And luckily, a pediatrician, as you said, had just returned from training in England. I believe he had been in town setting up a private practice for a while, but he became well known among the locals. So my grandma took me to him, and like we all say, anytime you see a complex case and the patient could be sick and dying, we say, oh, it's a great case. So I was a great case.
You were a great case.
I presented a very complex dilemma to him. So he basically told my grandma, this kid cannot go home. We have to admit him.
Oh.
So I was admitted. My grandma started crying, and I said, Grandma, why are you crying? She said, we don't have any money. And the doctor said, don't worry, I'll take care of him. And so he became my first philanthropist, my first exposure to free giving. And so he basically, admitted him. I stayed in his house, which was the clinic, for about 6 months. And during that 6-month period, I gradually got better. And I had not seen my father by that time at the age of 7. I had not shed light on set eyes on my dad at that time.
Oh my God.
He became like my role model.
Yeah.
And I became my dad, and I became enthusiastic about his work, his injections. He could give an injection with lightning speed. You wouldn't feel the needle. And subsequently, I became the promoter of vaccinations and inoculations among my peers. Let's go for one. It's nothing.
Even at a young age, at age 7, then 6,
That's
7,
right.
8.
Yes. So after I got well, I went back to school, and that was in 1957, 58. I was about 8 years old at that time, in 2nd grade. And I just continued through school having him, and I went back to him regularly for checkups. So he became my, sort of like a role model, my dad, the doctor. And I call him the doctor. Basically we called them magicians in those days.
Yeah.
Because they had magic to cure. So at the age of 10, I met my dad for the first time, because I went searching for him, and I found him. He at that time had relocated to his hometown and was a court magistrate, very intelligent, hard-working guy. But he was with his first wife at that time and 9 children. So he basically advised me to not be like him, to work hard and not become poor, and to learn as much as I could and be God-fearing. And I took those advice, and basically went back to school and had in mind becoming a doctor one day who could also give back to the poor. So becoming a doctor, then eventually decided on surgery.
So the doctor became your surrogate father figure, so to speak.
Correct. Yeah.
And did you? Because one of the other things that you had mentioned, I think that you always wanted to be the best. So when did that come forward? Was that when you were small, you were like you wanted to be the best, or you realized later you always wanted to excel? You weren't satisfied with just phoning it in, so to speak.
Right. Well, it's a good question. I mean, I always wanted to be like him, and to me, he was the best doctor. Because I honestly thought I wasn't going to make it, and for him to have cured me, he had to be good. So I figured if I was going to be anybody for any reason, for anything or profession, I had to be good. And also coming from a poor family and recognizing that if you're going to succeed and excel, you have to do extremely well and leave no room for any mistake or for a downturn. So, and also when I traveled to the U.S., recognizing that even when I was growing up, if I got into trouble, I had no one to bail me out. My mom was poor. She would probably just say, just take him to jail. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I basically didn't have the kind of family and the economic support that other friends and peers had. So I had to do exceedingly well in anything to leave no room for mistake and to have no doubt in anybody's mind, because I couldn't bribe anybody, I couldn't persuade anybody, I couldn't influence anybody. So I had to live on my merit.
Yeah.
And I carried that all along through high school, college, university. It had to be my merit. If I left room for any other influences, I didn't have it. So
you realized this though early on. So this is a lot of self-awareness or awareness of your situation. And in my experience, people who grow up in situations like you've grown up in, they are very aware of the context of their situation.
Correct.
Right?
Yes, that is correct. And you cannot be average. You had to be above average and the best. Exactly. Because there's competition. And for me, the competition was keen. And having no other influence or any other factors to enhance my position, I had to be just good.
Yeah. And so your sister, you came to the U.S., your sister helped bring you to the U.S.
Well, basically, she hosted me.
She hosted you.
She hosted me, but basically, my mom helped me to get my ticket and my visa to come to the U.S., and she hosted us, my friend and I.
Okay, and so you knew you were obviously going to go. You wanted to go somewhere else, obviously.
Yes, the main purpose of traveling was to come and go to medical school, but I had several hurdles to clear because I had just finished high school. Okay, and this was the British system, which was different from the American system. Yeah, the high school diploma. So to go to college, I didn't take the SAT. I had borrowed money to come to the US. I had to pay that loan back. So I had a mandatory 1.5, 2 year of work time to pay back my debt. So that's the first thing I did, is to find work and save some money and pay my debt before the creditors went after my mom. Okay.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So I did that for 1.5 years. So I did 100-hour work week for 1.5 years. So
and that was, what was your job?
So I had an 8 to 2 p.m. Restaurant busboy work, and I had a 4 p.m. to midnight machine shop factory work. 5 days a week. And then I had a 32-hour Saturday, Sunday security guard work.
Oh my gosh.
So if you put it all together, I think it's like 96 or something like that. So I did 18 straight months to save money to pay my bills. And then I started college after that and quit all the jobs with the exception of the security. And then, because that was more flexible. And then eventually I got work steady and picked up tutoring jobs on campus and managed to carry 24 credits a semester with 2 summers and finish 4 years in 3 years.
That's impressive. So, and I guess your mom was okay, right? You paid.
She was fine. Yeah, I paid my debt, and after the second year, I was able to bring my girlfriend to the U.S.
So, did that work out?
It worked out very well. Yeah, Hilda and I have been married. We're going on 45 years now.
That's great.
Yeah, she came as a teenager.
She came as a teenager, so you've known her since what age then?
Since she was 16.
She was 16? Oh, okay. So you met her. So she, I'm sure she's a lot of your reason for your success also.
Incredible. Amazing. Yeah. She's really been my backbone. Being a spine surgeon, I can understand the purpose of having a
backbone. So then talk to me a little bit about getting into orthopedics. And I know you said, you mentioned you have your pros and cons list, and I make a lot of my decisions like that too. A lot of times it's pros and cons, and then I throw the list out and then go with my gut. So you said that pros were higher on ortho, so you went towards ortho, but how did you choose surgery, and then how did you choose orthopedics?
Well, it seems like you've read quite a bit. I mean,
oh yeah, I did all my homework. I've been very nervous about this.
I don't even know why I say this, other than in my upcoming book.
Oh, are you writing a book?
Yes.
Oh, yes, this is a plug for your book then too.
Good shot.
That's great.
Anyway, so basically, growing up, I was quite good with my hands. You know, I did very well in arts and crafts workshops and classes. I understood 3-dimensional aspects of the sciences. So surgery, I was quite intrigued by working with your hands. And going into medicine, I knew I had to be a surgeon just for the fact that I could do well as a technician. Okay, yeah. In addition to my mental acuity. So surgery was my goal. The type of surgery was something I had to decide on. But during the 4th year of medical school, I had done well in all my surgical specialties, so I was kind of confused as to which one. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, it's good when you don't have, well, I didn't have any role model, also as to, like my son is an orthopedic surgeon because I was his role model. And for him, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I didn't have the kind of role model. So the first role model that I had in medical school was Dr. Mickelson, who was a spine surgeon.
Okay.
I remember shadowing him one day, and we saw this horrible deformity. And I said, what is this? Because I'd never seen an x-ray like that before. And he said, scoliosis. I said, what's scoliosis? He said, you never heard about it? I said, no. So he started explaining what scoliosis is and what it does to people. And I said, oh, this is the stuff that I've been seeing back home that we call it a hunchback. We think it's all from the witches and the wizards, and people are done lame and they get crippled, they can't breathe. I got it. So can this be cured? He said, well, not in the sense of curing, but you can treat it and stop it from getting worse. And in early cases, you can actually make it better. I said, great. That's wonderful. That was my first exposure as a preceptor. But I went through the rest of medical school and wanted to be a surgeon. And then I tried to figure out which of the surgical subspecialties I could do well with my technical abilities. So all the surgeries require technical proficiency. So I decided, well, I'm not going to apply to any of them because we had to apply 2 years ahead of time. But I decided I'll take a chance and really convince myself that whatever I apply to is what I know I want and I can do well. So I decided to go to St. Vincent's Hospital, where they offered as an internship in surgery, and you did all the surgical subspecialty rotations. So I did urology, neurosurgery, cardiothoracic, orthopedics. And at the end of the second year, I had narrowed it down to 2, urology and orthopedics, because I find urology and orthopedics as the professions that had the happiest guys. I'm not kidding. I thought, to me, the general surgeons were not so nice. Excuse me to say. They were always yelling at us and beating us on us and curse. And I said, wait a minute, I can't do this. That's not my personality, So, but the orthopedic guys were super nice. They enjoyed what they were doing. They saw kids, they saw adults, they saw girls, they saw boys, and the variety was very appealing. On the other hand, I had a great professor in urology, and he was the nicest fellow, and I really enjoyed working with him. So I said, well, these are the 2. So I'm going to put, so actually I kind of, I jumped the gun and applied for urology and got into the urology program at Columbia. But after the interview and coming home, I wasn't happy. So I came home and I told my wife that, honey, this is what I decided to do, but I'm not too thrilled. And she said, well, why don't you think about it some more? And I said, okay, I will. So that's where I decided the best way to come to a decision is to do a self-assessment and have the pros and cons of each of the 2. So I had a sheet of paper and I wrote all the negatives of one and another one, all the negatives on the other, and I wrote all the cons and I tabled it. And when I tabled it, orthopedics had more pros than cons and urology had the least. So between the 2, the check went to orthopedics. And I don't know the criteria that I used. Nice people, variety of cases, emergencies, too much water in the OR. I mean, I don't know the criteria that I used. I wish those were the days that we didn't have digital, recording, and I wish I had those manuscripts. But it was very intriguing. I mean, it was definite. Today you would call it a SWOT analysis.
Yes.
That's exactly what I did, So now when I see SWOT analysis, I say, oh, it's intuition. I knew what it meant then. Yeah. What were the strengths and the weaknesses, the opportunities and the threats? I mean, basically, that's what I did.
Yeah.
Orthopedics was way ahead. So I decided, forget it. So I called the urology department. I said, I'm declining your offer. And the guy said, are you sure? I said, yeah. But then I realized to do that, it meant that I had to wait 2 years to get into orthopedics.
Oh.
But that didn't bother me as much. I just wanted to make sure that I had made the right decision. To me, the decision was the key, not getting into a situation where I will regret or realize that I have to do it over again. So I chose to decline the offer and then wait for 2 years. Now, so waiting for 2 years, I thought, well, I had to do something. I just can't go and sit home. So I need to do something academic so that at least I stay in touch with the academics. So I decided what I should do, maybe a fellowship, like a research fellowship. So orthopedic pathology and orthopedic biomechanics were the two research fellowships that I thought if I did, it will at least keep me abreast of the discipline and the people involved. So I applied for orthopedic pathology at special surgery and got into orthopedic pathology at special surgery. So that at least will cut down one of the 2 years. So I figured if I did that for a year, at least I will have to wait just an extra year, not 2 years of staying at home. So I did the orthopedic pathology fellowship at special surgery, and then luckily a position opened up right after my orthopedic pathology for the orthopedic residents coming into the PGY3, because it was also my year that they were transitioning from 2 years of surgery and 3 years of orthopedics to 1 year and 4 years. So there was a spot in the 2 and 3 year for the transition. So I was very, very lucky. And I was at the right place at the right time. And I had done so much work then in the orthopedic department and the pathology department. And I also got to know all the attendants at special surgery. So I was not a stranger, So when the position opened up and I applied, luckily I was selected as the resident for the PGY3. So in a sense, I only lost 1 year, and the 1 year was not really lost because I used it in doing orthopedic pathology. That is also when I started my research in spine surgery, because it was during that year that I dissected 100 human spines from the autopsy room and then wrote the spine atlas with Peter Bullough, wrote several papers in spine journals. So during the orthopedic residency, even though I liked all the subspecialties, I had become sort of a de facto spine surgeon on the basis of my research, my anatomy work, my pathology work. So I applied for a spine fellowship at the Twin Cities. Yeah, so that year really was a defining year for me, to go into pathology and then do my research in spine surgery, spine anatomy and pathology, and then basically to get into the spine fellowship at the Twin Cities, where I work with Bob Winter and John Moore and John Longstein, David Ogo, David Bradford, Jim Ogilvie, and so transfer. So my future was pretty decided then, and I'm glad that I made those decisions.
It almost seems like the urology thing helped you out a little bit.
In a way, yeah, it made me do a very deep self-assessment, and then also really look inside myself. What really did I want for my life? And I wish kids today would do the same thing. If you're lucky to have a role model, that's great. But even with that, you still, we all have our likes and dislikes. We're not like all our fathers, all our mothers, or our brothers. My son, for instance, will never do spine surgery. His personality is one for his hand surgeon. And he loves upper extremity surgery. He does shoulders and elbows and hands. He did 2 fellowships in upper extremity. And I say, why don't you do spine surgery? He said, you work too hard. It's not like
Plus, they get to sit down in hand surgery too.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think doing a self-assessment and doing your SWOT analysis is what everyone should do in making a decision. Yeah, and of course, we're Christians, so we also pray a lot. My wife and I pray a lot, so we put every decision making into our prayers, and also look for divine guidance.
It seems like you've had you have a good division between some divine guidance, some luck, some good personal decisions, and some good self-awareness, I think, because
and hard work. Because
hard work. Oh yeah, absolutely hard work.
At the end of the day, they're gonna look at who are you. Look at who are you and why should I give you this position or this job. So I always made sure that my merit was impeccable. So that when I went for a position or an interview, or for a competition, that at least the merit part was done, and not just on the basis of need.
Yeah.
Need is good. But also as being an African American, I knew the odds that I was against, that were against me. Not that I ever, I can remember being discriminated against. I mean, so people ask me, have you ever been discriminated against? I said, I cannot remember an incident, an instant where I felt that I've been discriminated against, because everybody liked me. And I think the reason why everybody liked me is because I stayed out of trouble. I was honest. I was truthful. I worked hard, and I was very open. And if I realized that you were not someone that I can get along with, I found another friend.
Yeah. Well, you got to you've hit a bunch of my questions. I wanted to talk about mentors, but I did want to talk a little bit about if you faced any discrimination or racism, or, I know you obviously were in New York. So, as a New Yorker, New York is really a city of the world rather than, a kind of quintessential American city, I would say. But, you don't feel like you really ran into any problems, which is amazing.
No, not really. Not that I recall. I mean, Brooklyn College was pretty much like a Jewish environment. I got along with all the rabbis and all my Jewish friends. I ate kosher food with them. And then we had the Caribbean community that I got along with also extremely well. I established a National Black Science Society, NBSSO, National Black Science Students Organization, of which I was the first president at Brooklyn College, because I knew some of the difficulties that some of the minority students had. And I say, guys, you may feel that you're being discriminated against, that you're not getting into medical school, engineering school. The only weapon we have is our merits. So let's get back to the classroom. So I formed that organization, and we tutored ourselves. We worked our butt off. And when we went for our interviews and our appointments, I had a 4.0. The other guys had 3.9. So you cannot be rejected if you do so well. So I knew discrimination existed, but I wasn't going to let myself suck into it. And I basically did not think I would not say that I met overt discrimination that was directed towards me. And I consider myself, maybe I was very lucky that I didn't see that negative aspect of the American society, because I know it exists, you know, and I know it does exist. And I pity those who face it all the time. And that's what I tell my sons, do your work. There are a lot of nice people in this world. There are a lot of very good Black people, very, very, very good white people. I've had great friends on both sides of the aisle. So just do the best you can, and work with the guys who like you.
So what was it like going to Minnesota?
Minnesota was it was interesting, because I had to actually apply to several programs, excluding Minnesota. And it was the last day of their interview that I went for the interview, because Dr. Wilson, who was the surgeon-in-chief of special surgery, had just come from a meeting that was that Bradford also attended. And he had talked to Bradford about my interest in spine surgery. And Bradford said, well, have him apply. So when he came and told me if I had applied to the Twin Cities, I said, no, I had not. I said, why not? Well, I can't afford to travel. All the programs I was applying to were local. Mm-hmm. So, I'll give you some money. You go to Minnesota for the interview. So he actually gave me $5,000.
Oh,
very, very nice gentleman. So I went to Minnesota for the interview. It was a Saturday, and the fellow who came for the interview with me was Mike Kasher, and we were the last to be interviewed, and we were the two to be picked.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so going to Minnesota was basically another one of those lucky strikes. The introduction of Bradford to Wilson, And then when I went to Minnesota for my interview, again, as I say, just as I've been saying, I went not with the impression or the intention of being given a position because of Wilson. I went with my compendium of the articles that I had written, my CV, my orthopedic pathology manuscript, and they were intrigued at the work that I had done in spine pathology. So that's the merit part. And then being recommended by Philip Wilson was the catalyst, so like the bonus. And so I was given a spot. And going to Minnesota, I worked as hard as I could again, and managed to complete a fellowship and also be considered for a position in the department with David Bradford.
Yeah. But you chose to come back, right, to HSS? Yeah.
So after the fellowship, I knew I was going to Minnesota for the fellowship and go back to HSS. Yeah. That was the original plan, because Dr. Wilson and Dr. Levine had both asked me to come back to help build a spine program at HSS. So that was the initial plan. But after the fellowship, David Bradford said, well, I'm establishing another fellowship and the department and the practice with James Ogilvie and Enso Transfer, which would be different from Dr. Winter and Dr. Launstein's fellowship. So the divorce, the university divorce was at the peak when I was a fellow. So I'm the only fellow who has 2 certificates. I have one from David Bradford and Ogilvie as the Twin Cities Scoliosis Spine Fellow, and I have another one from Bob Winter and John Launstein as the Minnesota Spine Fellow. After us, it was just one. And before us was just one.
Just one.
So I brag as having done 2 fellowships. So when I was, both actually also offered me positions. Winter did and Bradford did.
Oh boy, you're going to have to pick a side.
Yeah, but it was easy because I went with the one who offered me the fellowship first. So it was instant. I said, wait a minute, I like these guys. They are both great. Who do I go with? I'm going to give it to the fellow who asked me first.
Yeah.
So Bradford asked me first. So when Winter asked me, I said, I'm sorry. I've asked Dr. Bradford has asked me, and I've told him yes. So he didn't have any objection. He said, okay, if he has already offered you a position, then I can say, I can change your mind. And he was very understanding, and I didn't have to think about that. There was no SWOT analysis for that one. It was just being plain honest with myself. Yeah. So, but then the dilemma was, what do I tell the people at HSS that I'm looking? So I talked to Dr. Bradford. I said, Dr. Bradford, I came here to train and to go back. Now you're asking me to stay, which I think is a great opportunity because I can learn more from you. Having completed the fellowship does not make me an experienced spine surgeon. There's a lot more I can learn from you. And I'd love to do that, for some time before, even if I ever go back to New York. And I'll leave that, in God's hands. But I have a problem. He said, what is it? I say, Dr. Wilson and Dr. Levine are not going to be happy that you're keeping me here. He said, don't worry, I'll speak to them. So he went to bat for me to basically let him know that he's starting a new practice. He likes me to stay around and to help him build a practice. Maybe one day I'll come back to New York. So they should understand that I'm not coming back. And they said, fine. So when I called Wilson said, well, Bradford has told me about staying on. You can learn some more. We hope one day you come back.
Yeah.
Don't stay out too long. I said, but good luck. And I said, oh, phew. So I stayed in Minneapolis for 3 years.
Yeah.
And then there were some issues with the family, not my immediate family, but the extended family in Africa. We had left. I left Ghana in 1972. Now we're talking about 1986, 87. So it's gone like 14 years.
Yeah.
And we had no property. We haven't done much in the country that we left. My grandmother-in-law had passed away. My grandmother had passed away. My father had passed away. my aunt-in-law had passed away. So it was becoming very, very, very depressing that the people that we've left, we haven't been able to do anything for them, and they were leaving us. And when my wife and I sat down and realized it was all economics. Okay. So even though we're doing well in Minneapolis, we figured, well, we could probably do better somewhere else, and increase our, financial position. Mm-hmm. So that's when we decided, well, I need to find a practice that will give me the economic advantage, both academics and private practice. So I started, calling headhunters, and that's how we ended up in Minneapolis, in California. So even though I decided I needed to go back somewhere and do better, for some reason it didn't occur to me that I had to go back to New York right away. I still can't figure it out. I thought I had closed the books in New York, but I knew that if I had gone back to New York, I would have done very, very well economically. But for some reason, we decided, well, let's go somewhere else. And we chose California because we found a job opportunity in the JBJS advertising for a spine surgeon, and the salary was pretty good. So I went to California to meet with Gilbert Marrero. Gilbert Marrero was then like 70-something. He actually wrote me a letter 2 weeks ago. Oh. He's 97.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, he's 97. Unbelievable guy. Yeah, so I went to California because it was affiliated with Rancho. It was also affiliated with USC. So I knew that there was a fellowship and there was an academic aspect of it. And then we had a private practice at Whittier Presbyterian. So it's a great combination. So we left Minneapolis after 3 years and went to California. And that's when I established the Southern California Complex Spine Scoliosis Center. So that was basically my brainchild, the Southern California Complex Spine Scoliosis Center. So Marrero was the medical director. I was the associate director. And then we started the academic program. No, the Rancho was already there. So Serena, Serena was my junior resident at HSS. And then at Rancho, he was the fellow in the spine fellow when I went to California in 1990.
Yeah.
Her last 6 months of her fellowship was under me. So.
And then she went to Minnesota after
and
that.
Then I told her that I had just left Minnesota, so there's a position open, which was basically my position with Bradford. Yeah. And it's interesting how things work out, because if I had stayed a year longer in California, in Minnesota, I would have gone to San Francisco with Bradford.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Definitely, I would have. And I'm not sure if that would have met my academic career, financial aspirations that I was talking about.
Yeah.
So the year that I left, I think he was planning on leaving. For some reason, he didn't tell me. But I left not knowing that he was also going to be leaving. So when I left that year later is when I went to California, met Serena, and I informed Serena there's a position open in Minneapolis. So she went to Minneapolis and actually occupied my position.
Yeah.
And then a year later, she moved to San Francisco with Bradford. So I could see my future if I had stayed. I basically bunted it, Whether it was good or bad, but looking at myself today, I think it was the right decision.
I think you made out okay.
I think so. I can't complain. No, if it was going to be any better, I would love to see how better it was going to be. Yeah. So I went to California in 1990, stayed for a year. I was there as the fellowship director at Rancho with Ram Mudian. So we trained a lot of guys at Rancho. And then a year later, I decided, well, I don't think I can do all this work by myself, because Marrero is getting up in years. Okay. So I decided I should bring a junior fellow. So I recruited Gupta.
Oh.
Manish Gupta.
Yeah.
Manish Gupta, basically right after his fellowship in Louisville, joined me in California. I offered him his first job. Oh. Yeah. So
this is a who's who in the SRS.
Exactly. So Manish came in. I said, Manish, what do you know? He said, this is what I have been doing. This is what I know. I said, well, forget all that. I'm going to train you again. But he came with a great experience and background. And then so we basically became the duo of the Southern California Complex Science Solutions Center. And things were going extremely well. I was there for 4 years. I mean, in California, we wrote a bunch of papers. We did the travel. We went to Japan. We went to Europe. And I mean, we did everything. And I think one of my HIPS award was also when I was in California, or at least as a nominee. But after 4 years, I realized, and during this period also, because it was economically better, we were able to build homes for our families in Ghana. Oh. Yeah, we managed to build homes for our parents, be able to bring our sisters to the U.S. on sponsorship basis. My 2 brothers came to join us. Hilda's brother and 2 sisters came to join us. My other siblings were in Germany. So we're able to support the rest of the extended family. Because bringing them to the U.S. for them to go to school and study and become independent also relieved us of the financial burden of supporting them every day. So things really, really got better in that sense. Academic was great, practice was great, and then the finances was very good, and we were able to support everybody else. And we managed to travel back to Ghana also to meet with them, bring our children with us, let them see what the country looked like, who the folks were that we have left back home. So it was a good move, So I was basically on a 4-year term. 4 years in
4-year rotation.
4-year rotation. Yeah, 4 years in New York as resident, 4 years in Minneapolis as a fellow and attending, and then the 4th year in Minneapolis. In California, we started thinking, what's the next move?
Yeah.
And I don't know what triggered it, but for some reason, I think Hilda and I went back to HSS for an alumni meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, and during the alumni meeting, Ross Warren was the chief. And Ross Warren said, Oheneba, it's time to come back. We need someone to help us with the spine fellowship and also the practice. Dr. Levine is getting up in years, as we can see, and we really don't have anybody doing complex deformity surgery, like you're doing. And I'd given several papers to, HSS community. I was on the lecture circuit with the academy. I was attending the SRS. My first SRS was in Bermuda in 1986. But by 91, I think in 1991 also with Ram Mudian. So at the alumni, this was 94, he said, you want to consider coming back? I said, so what is the package? Well, you're probably going to become the chief of the scoliosis service, if not right away. So we're going to promote you as an associate professor based on all that you have done. And we're going to give you a good financial package. I said, well, I have a house and I have kids in school. And he said, don't worry, we'll give you a package that will actually take care of the house that you own, more like a buyback. I said, wow, okay, it's an offer I couldn't refuse.
Yeah.
So Hilda and I again went back, and talked about it, just like we've done every time that we've faced a very major decision. I've never left her out of all of this. We pray about it. We talk to the kids so they also know what's happening. Our kids have never attended the same school for more than 3 years.
Oh.
Yeah, none of them has gone to the same school for more than 3 years. They were like ambassador kids, and they make friends so easily, and added new friends to the old one. They're still seeing their grade school friends.
That's great.
They're like ambassadors kids. They adapt extremely well, and they get along with everybody extremely well. So we decided, well, maybe this is the time to move. It was a tough decision because I had built a practice in California. It was doing extremely well. And we were actually considering expanding the physical environment and the physical facilities itself. I had donated money for the new department. They still have my name on and a plaque on the walls in California, Southern California, for spine scholarship. So we told Morero and Monish that we have to go to New York because it's a position that certainly is way, way, way better than what I have. I'm doing great here, economically, academically. It's a great environment, but I think we need to go back. So it was basically a sad moment, but considering our future, and also around that time, Hilda and I had debated whether we were going to even go, because it had taken us so long, to move through all these stages of academic and educational development, practice and professional development, that we had built homes in Ghana. But the question is, were we ever going to go back?
Yeah.
That's where I thought maybe I was too overqualified to even go back. I wanted to do what the doctor did for me. But he came in as a pediatrician and a family medicine guy. Here I was a super specialist.
Yeah.
And there were no such super specialists in the country. Not even facilities, not the resources. So if I was going to go back to Ghana and practice deformity surgery, where was I going to do that? So Hilda and I debated a lot about it. And she threatened me and said, well, if you don't go back, then I think you're going to have to live here by yourself. I said, I will charge you for abandonment. You're not going anywhere. She said, well, then you better think fast.
I knew she was a big part of all your life decisions.
So she actually said, why don't you then form an organization that you can use as a foundation to get supporters to go help you? Because if you don't think you can do this all by myself, you can get international volunteers. You can have your patients help you financially. So I said, great. So she and I actually came up with the name Focus. Foundation of Orthopedics and Complex Spine.
Yeah.
So we went back to New York in '94, and I went back I was the co-chief of the Scoliosis Service. Levine retired in '96. I became the chief of the Scoliosis Service in '96. And then in 1998, Focus was incorporated in New York as a 501c3 non-governmental organization. So it was born in California, and then became a reality in '98 as an established organization in New York. And then we made our first trip to Ghana to do our first surgery the summer of '98. But I had made several trips prior to '98 to Ghana to just give some lectures, visit clinics, establish some acquaintances, get to know the local professionals who I could work with, what the facilities were like. And I realized in the beginning that there was no way I was going to be able to build a hospital. It was just going to take too much time, too much money to do that. So we decided, well, let's just do mission trips.
Yeah.
If we just did mission trips, whatever funds I raised, we can support ourselves. Yeah. So each trip, $50,000, we could help 4 or 5 patients. We could get equipment that we needed. We can also get donations to supplement. And then basically what I did is I called on my friends. Gupta was the first volunteer. Michael Mendelo came on board. And then several others joined the bandwagon later on. I called my Spanish friends that I had worked with in Spain. I called them the conquistadors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So I basically just anybody that I knew, I just extended an invitation to. And then I went to the SRS. That's when Global Outreach was formed. It was actually around the same time the GOP was formed by Jim Ogilvie. I think it was 2005. Yes, 2005 GOP, and that meeting was in Buenos Aires. Yeah. So GOP basically became sort of like the supporting organization behind our missions programs. And as you know, Focus was recognized by GOP as the first site And then we recruited Ken Poanesa and all the other SRS members who joined us subsequently. So down the going back was becoming real, but it had to take several steps and go through several phases. First as missions, and then subsequently I realized that for this to become permanent and sustainable, we needed an infrastructure that we can control, manage, and also use to develop local professionals. And that's when we embarked upon the hospital project in 2008. And then we were able to raise about $20 million to complete the project in 2012 when we did our first surgery at Focus Hospital. Then it was time for me to think about making a physical move.
Moving back, yeah. So when you started, I'm very curious, a lot of this GOP stuff, we talk a lot about, the value of mission trips versus really amelioration of care on the ground and building, enabling the locals to take care of things themselves. And again, to kind of go back to that video, you talk a lot about the balance between, you going there and teaching and how much of an impact you've made on so many surgeons here, but then also how can you make a similar impact over there? And did you always expect that this would be that big? Did you want it to be a really big? You seem like everything you've done has become really big. And I think you mentioned that in the interview too, that you always dreamt big. You always wanted to be the best and you always dreamt big, which is, I guess, amazing. But for a lot of people who don't have resources, sometimes people get a little frustrated. If you can't do big things, then maybe we shouldn't do anything at all. So I guess, what are your thoughts on how a regular member of the SRS can contribute and in the context of what you've done?
Yeah, so I think it boils down to, one, your aspirations, how much risk you want to take, how much hope you have in yourself, and how much faith you have in what you're doing, and how much sacrifice you also want to make. Because it really will require sacrifices, it will require patience, it will require some faith and persistence, and also being able to take a failure, because we don't always succeed in what we do. But if you dream high and you succeed medium, you've achieved something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if you dream low and you lose everything, you have nothing.
Yeah.
So I usually go for the gusto.
Yeah.
So if I go for 100 and I get 90, that's great. If I get 50, that's not bad.
Yeah.
If I start with 50 and I get 20, that's awful.
Yeah.
So, and then also the sacrifice that you have to make, sometimes it requires your own resources. And I put in a lot of money into millions. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to make that sacrifice, it may not succeed, because you can't expect someone to help you or do something that you don't believe in yourself.
Yes.
You don't believe in giving yourself. Okay. So if you put all that together, then I think you can go for the ultimate. Okay. And again, it depends on your personality also. Not everyone is willing to make that kind of sacrifice, and also humility is required. Okay, so if you put all that together, your personality, humility, the sacrifices you like to make, the risk you want to take, and also the opportunities that you want to give other people, because sometimes you may not be able to do it yourself.
Yeah,
you have to bring other people on board. So if you put all those ingredients together, then you can say, well, this is the product that I want to come out of this endeavor. Okay, and such was Focus. Okay, that if you don't think about welcoming the local people, and welcoming the local people is not always easy, because they also have their pride, they have their way of doing things, and you're gonna have to persuade them to at least give you a chance.
Yeah.
And then listen to you. And if you do that and they recognize that what you have is good and it's going to help everybody, they will welcome you and they will accept it. We basically paid everybody that we went back home to work with.
Yeah.
And I went as a volunteer. They didn't get paid, but I didn't expect them to be volunteers.
Yeah.
because they had families to feed and they had work to do and they also had aspirations and they didn't have the same economic opportunities that I had. So we paid everybody.
Yeah.
We paid the surgery department, anesthesia department, we paid for the patients. So we went above and beyond to make them accept us. And also they recognized that they could learn something from us. Okay. So learning from us was also imparting knowledge and technology. So there were a lot of pluses for them to receive us and also to be able to work with us and even take care of the patients that were left behind. For 10 years that we went to Ghana as missions, I never went back to either go do an IND or take out a broken rod.
Yeah.
Those guys were always ready to do those for us because we had involved them, in the process, and they were learning. And today, the 4 spine surgeons in Ghana have been working with me for all these years, and they are the 3 SRS. Okay. So it's how you work with them and also how you welcome the people that you're going back with. Most of our international volunteers were really volunteers. They paid their way and everything. So it's a complex situation, but if you work your way well and you organize yourself, you make the sacrifices and accept the logic of the local people, because you also have to learn their ways. The improvisation that you have to make, whilst you are there, I think you can succeed.
So I think we're almost done. It's almost been an hour. So one of the things that has really come up in this hour is how much of a visionary you are. So you have to say now, all of these time periods, you've had a vision for what the next X number of years was going to be, or what your vision for your Southern California Spine Institute was, or your project HSS or Focus. So what's your vision now? You've got, hopefully, maybe 30 years left?
Well, God willing, I'll be 70 in December.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, luckily, thank God I'm doing okay. So my vision is for Focus to become a sustainable infrastructure guided by the people that I have taught, that I have kept in the hospital, so they can continue to impart knowledge to others and also to provide optimal care for the Ghanaians and the people and on the continent and in the sub-region, the type of care that I envision for everyone. So I'm hoping that it will become an independent organization and institution that will carry on my aspirations. And for myself, spend more time as a teacher, basically giving as much as I can to the community in Ghana, whether it's the local community, the academic community, and of course, continue to support international programs the best as I can. SRS, I haven't done a lot with the AOS, but now I've been working with CCOT also. But I have 4 grandchildren too, so I need to also spend some time with them and brush up on my golf game.
Oh yeah, your golf game, I know. That was on the CNN
right.
interview also.
So I don't know what the future holds for me, but I believe that I'm also turning my attention more towards church programs. We're Catholics, and hopefully I can become a little bit more involved in the church and also in the traditional life of the Ghanaians. I'm from a royal family, and there's a lot to be done in that aspect also.
Well, Oheneba Boachie-Adjei, thank you so much. We're looking forward to your book. Can you tell us anything about when it'll be done or when it'll be out?
Well, the manuscript is really done right now. All I need is a publisher. So if you find one, let me know.
Okay.
Manuscript out.
I don't think you'll have a problem.
But put the word out. Maybe SRS members, even if SRS wants to publish it, that's great. I'll give it to them to publish.
Okay, that sounds good. We'll ask them.
Yeah, consider it. I don't mind giving it to the SRS to publish it.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thanks. That was a great podcast. I'd like to thank Dr. Boachie for joining us, and to all the listeners, thank you for joining us, and look forward to our next podcast coming out soon.
The Scoliosis Research Society is a nonprofit professional organization made up of physicians and allied health personnel. Their primary focus is on providing continuing medical education for healthcare professionals and on funding and supporting research in spinal deformities. Please visit srs.org for further information.